Hi, my name is Madeline Major, and this is my final project. Joseph Campbell created something called the hero's journey, and what it is a map of the stages a hero must go through from start to finish. Today, we're going to be looking at the return stage and why it is important to the hero's journey. Specifically, why must the hero accept the return? So the hero's journey is basically broken up into 3 steps: the departure, the initiation, and the return. Each stage has steps that the hero must complete to ascend to the next, which we'll see in the next slide. But very basically, the departure is when the hero faces his or her call to the adventure and prepares for their journey. The initiation is when the hero is on their journey, faces obstacles and temptations, and his or her true character is tested. And the return is when the hero must return to his or her ordinary world. So when you look at it, you might think the initiation is the most important. After all, it's when most of the journey takes place. But I want to focus on the return, and we're going to focus on the parts in red, and we're going to look at them a little more closely. So we have the refusal of the return. The refusal of the return comes when the hero faces the chance to stay in the unknown world and not return to the known world. The rescue from without is when the hero returns from the journey, and it can be difficult, sometimes just as dangerous as the journey itself. Portals of exit. The hero cannot just leap back into the ordinary world. They must familiarize themselves with their past routines and the mundane. In the colliding worlds, the forces from the ordinary world and the unknown will begin to clash, forcing the hero to make a choice, which leads us to the choice. The hero must decide to either face their new identity or to simply return to life the way they knew it before. Awakened life. The hero must use their newfound wisdom and spread their knowledge to the common world. They must accept who they've become in order to achieve awakened life and start a new journey. So, why is this important? Let's look at 2 examples of heroes who struggled with the return, one fictional and one real. So a real person is Ernest Shackleton. He was an incredible explorer who defied the odds when his ship was destroyed and his crew was stranded in the Arctic. Due to his leadership abilities, he was able to bring his whole crew back alive, but his need to explore and adventure was insatiable. When he returned home from his journey, he could not wait to get back out there. He did not take the right amount of time to process his return to the ordinary world, and he refused the call. So, refusal of the call. Shackleton's need for exploration could not be subdued by his return to society. He joined the army soon after his return, despite weakening health. His rescue. Shackleton was unhappy with ordinary life. He went back to planning and fantasizing about his future explorations. The portals of exit. Shackleton began a lecture series after his return, but his life was not rooted in the ordinary. Colliding worlds. Delivering his lectures brought Shackleton back to his journey and reignited his enthusiasm. He was faced with a choice. His choice, Shackleton decided to return to the unknown world and planned another journey to the Antarctic. In awakened life, Shackleton ignored the signs of his deteriorating health and only made it to Brazil before he ultimately passed away and was unable to finish his journey. So, he refused to return, therefore ensuring his next journey would be disastrous. So what does this mean for Shackleton? Because he didn't go through each step of the return and fully accept it, he wound up rushing his return, rushing his processing. He didn't pay attention to his health, and if he had, maybe he would have been able to lead his last exploration successfully. Let's look at Anakin Skywalker. He's an iconic character from the Star Wars franchise, very powerful, but was fortunately succumbed to the temptation of the dark side of the Force. His refusal to call is when he fights with temptation of the dark side and loses motivation to become a Jedi. His rescue, Obi-Wan is unable to rescue Anakin. Rather, Palpatine persuades Anakin to join the dark side. Portals of exit. Anakin cannot face the return world and ends up committing genocide. Colliding worlds. Anakin becomes conflicted with his feelings of the dark side and the light side and must decide which to defer to. His choice, the temptation becomes too much for Anakin. He chooses to go to the dark side instead of return to his ordinary world of the light side. Awakened life. Anakin faces Obi-Wan in a duel and ends up losing most of his limbs and comes very close to death. The only way he can survive is in a constrictive life support suit and lives the rest of his life in agonizing pain. So since he refused to return, he ended up committing terrible crimes, nearly dies, and all really because of his obsession with power. So what does this mean for Anakin? Had Anakin taken the time to return to the known world, he may have had more rational thoughts. He could have changed the whole Star Wars history and also been more in control of his obsession. Now, it is probably safe to say Anakin goes through a lot more journeys than just this one, and his final return would be at the end of the 6th movie, when he learns from his mistakes, but that's really an analysis for another time. So it's important to note, accepting the return doesn't mean the hero can't go on another journey, but without accepting the return, the next journey the hero takes will be much more difficult. So how does this apply in real life? Accepting the return is a processing period. In our own lives, it is important to take the right time to process things. What happens if we ignore this processing time? Well, have you ever been in a situation where you didn't take the right amount of time to process what happened, whether it's an injury or information, even a vacation? Bouncing back from that can be really difficult and sometimes cause more issues down the line. So it is important that we take the right amount of time to go through all the stages of the return before we get back into it. In conclusion, the return stage of the hero's journey is the time for the hero to process the journey that has taken place. If the hero struggles with the return or ignores one of the steps, their next journey will be very difficult. And so before we go on our next journey, we need to make sure that we take the time to accept our return. Even if our next journey is difficult, you'll have the right mindset and ability to go forth. Thank you.